Hi, welcome to my podcast, Real Conversations with Patty, where I bring on special guests that I admire because of their perseverance and dedication to break barriers and show every little girl and boy que si se puede. Today's guest is a person who I admire for a long time. I have known her literally my whole life. I mean, she's my cousin, which I greatly appreciate accepting being interviewed. She has accomplished many things from starting her farm insurance company from scratch to being one of the successful businesses in farmers insurance. She has gone through many ups and downs, but one thing is for sure, she did not give up. Le echó ganas y perseveró. I have the honor to introduce my special guest, Natalie Mercado. Hello.
Hi, thank you for
Hello.
having me here, Patty. I think what you're doing is
Thank you.
fantastic. So this is an honor and I'm ready to do this.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it. To get started, I want to ask you, what was your childhood like?
Ooh, well, my childhood was very volatile. I grew up in a lot of poverty, grew up on welfare and food stamps my entire life. Government housing. Both my parents at one point were in jail, in and out several times, lots of abuse. It wasn't a very good childhood, basically. A lot of abuse in the home, being told, I should have never had you. Whatever you'll do, you'll always be ugly. Just, it was a really hard, I don't feel like I've had a childhood, really. I grew up fairly fast. So, but I do think my childhood helped develop me tremendously of who I am today. So in a weird way, I am grateful for my childhood. Wouldn't wish it upon anyone else, but I learned to be the authentic me, taking off all these layers and finding out who the Natalie really was meant to be on my date of birth of May 24th before people in the world got a hold of me. So that's a little bit of my childhood.
From what you said, I feel like you have found who is the real Natalie because from your posts, you just have like a good personality.
Thank you. I try. I definitely, I think it's a lifelong experience. So I definitely try to always remember, okay, what is the true me without all the voices, without all the naysayers, without all these things being said. So even though you see me how I am now, there's times it's that little voice. And I'm like, wait, that's a lie. That was a lie. So, but thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. What would you say was the moment or life experience that shaped you who you are now?
I remember this one time I was walking down the street, first street where I lived, and I remember looking at the apartments around me. And I remember thinking I had two choices, plan A or plan B. I can continue on the same life that I had, which was I knew how much money I would get from welfare, how much food stamps I would get. I knew how much my rent would be based off subsidized housing on the government housing. And that was comfortable. In a weird way, it was comfortable, even though I knew it was not an ideal situation. It was not good. But it was familiar. But then plan B, and plan B meant to be better. I didn't know how to get to plan B. It was an unknown road. It's like two roads. This road was very familiar. And this road, I knew it was better, but it was like a big question mark and it was dark. And I remember thinking, I have two choices and I chose plan B. And I think I've just continued to choose plan B consistently, really. That I think was like my turning point. I probably was maybe in junior high where I thought this is what I want to do. And actually maybe that's a two-part question because I remember in third grade, 2 years before that, I had been picked up by CPS, Child Protective Services, and I was photographed. And 2 years after that, I was in third grade. And I remember at recess going to the very end of the field, all the grass play area. And I remember kneeling on the grass and praying for God to help me. And I think those have always been two pivotal points in my life that I can say, like, I decided something, even though it was third grade me. I don't know how old that is, like 8, maybe?
Probably 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 8.
The teacher speaks. Patty. Well, I think those two moments was God help me. I need help. Whatever little 8-year-old me thought that was. I still remember I had corduroy pants and they were ripped and it was cold. It was a cold morning. The grass was wet. And then I think the second time when I was in junior high and I just knew plan B, I just didn't know what plan B looked like. So those were probably my turning points. And I continue to pick them over and over again.
Did you have a dream as a child? Have that motivation, or were you just taking it day by day?
No, that's fine. And so that's actually a good question. I think for the most part, I was in survival mode. I was very sad as a child. I was definitely on survival mode. I think the one dream that I did have was if I can just become older, work in the cannery. And I thought working in the cannery was the best place to work. And cannery, meaning, if I don't know anybody else knows what that is basically picking fruit off of an assembly line and packaging it. You know, after the field workers get that, whatever that is, fruit, vegetables, and then you're on this assembly line. And I thought, if I can only work in a cannery, I'll be good. That was like my only little glimpse of hope. And then eventually I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. But that was a little bit of a dream. I think I did dream little things here and there. I loved singing. I loved dancing. I loved the artistic world. I loved the theatrics. So I think if I were to dream, like just random little Natalie dreaming is dreaming that. I love archaeology. But I think, you know, when it comes down to like reality, what I really wanted to do was survival mode. And let me just get out of here so I can work in the cannery. And I actually never ended up working in the cannery.
What was your first job?
I delivered the newspaper.
Oh, yeah.
I
Okay.
did. I
Oh.
delivered the newspaper. I think I was in 5th grade. I would fold up the newspaper and deliver. I had like a sack around me and pedal on my bike. That was like my first, like they gave me like money at the end of the week. I got a check, I guess you can say, whatever that was. But I delivered the newspaper. And then in high school, I got a job at a supermarket, Albertsons, as a grocery bagger. And I remember it was the newest grocery store in Merced, California. Interview started January 1st. I went there. I probably was like the 10th person in line for an interview. And I was 17. I got hired. I became a grocery bagger. And that was great because it was union. I didn't get paid a minimum wage. For the first time, I had like nicer clothes for my senior year. And then after high school, I moved out at 18, right when I turned 18. And I ended up getting a job at the meat department in Save Mart. That was a very hard, smelly, cold, wet job.
Yeah.
But you know what? I didn't get paid minimum wage. And I remember Sundays was like time and a half. So that was like my first job after being 18. And I did that for almost 2 years. And that was probably the most labor intensive job that I did. And I got hired for knowing Spanish. And your audience may not know this. It's odd because I'm a 3rd generation born Hispanic here. My mother went to high school here. My grandmother did. However, my father did not. He came over probably in his 20s from Mexico, from Michoacan. Spanish was in my household, but it was definitely not my first language. And they needed somebody who spoke Spanish. And I was like, yo hablo español. And I was like, they're like, you're hired. And it's funny because I didn't even know how to say oysters in Spanish until somebody pointed and they're like, ostiones. I'm like, oh, ostiones.
Yeah. We learn every day.
Or like, yeah, or, you know, octopus. I'm like, oh, wait, how do I say octopus? They're like, una libra de pulpo. I'm like, oh, pulpo. That's how I got hired. I actually should have never been hired straight to the meat department, but I said I knew Spanish and I learned really quick. Univision. Univision style.
You see. I wanted to ask, how did you decide that you wanted to be a farmer's insurance agent?
Ooh, when I worked at Save More, I remember meeting an insurance agent who looked well off, bought the nicest stuff from the meat department. He looked very happy and content, and he was an insurance agent. And I thought, I might want to do that. And he actually discouraged me not to. Shortly after that, I had purchased a vehicle. Insurance had just come into place in California that you had to have insurance. Now, this is 18-year-old me. I'm probably living on my own 2 months, 3 months. So I'm an insurance agent now, but back then I did not have insurance. I was driving dirty. I got pulled over and they didn't let me take my car because I had no insurance. So the officer made me walk home. I went to court and they said I needed to show proof of insurance. And I went inside of an insurance office and I was like, this is really nice. They're not wet. They're not cold. They don't have like beef blood on them, chicken stuff, fish stuff on them. They're not lifting heavy pallets of turkeys for Thanksgiving. And I just thought, oh, wow. I would like to work here. And I didn't start then. I eventually got into it maybe when I was about 24 years old. I studied to get my license. I actually did everything in reverse. People actually go in the insurance industry and then get their license, but I actually started studying for my hours to pass my license and then I got hired. So it was a little bit opposite. And then the transition of my business was a little bit different. I don't know if you're going to ask me about that.
Could you guide us on the steps to become an insurance agent?
Oh, to become an insurance agent,
Yeah.
you can contact like an office near you, like a district office. They'll guide you exactly what you have to do. I actually did
Okay.
it the really hard way, but
Okay.
now they'll tell you, okay, this is your study material. This is what you have to do. This is how many hours you have to put in of
Okay.
online studying.
Mhm.
You end up passing. There's different licenses. There's property casualty, which is to life and health. Some people get property, some people get casualty, some people get health only. I end up getting all four, which I think that's ideal for most people. I would think because you're able to sell all four lines of business. Once you get that license through the state of California, then you're every 2 years you do continuing education. But just even just getting an insurance license doesn't necessarily mean you know what you're doing. Probably like, you've done teaching, right?
Yeah.
It only prepares you so much until you get in the classroom. You're like, wait, they didn't teach me this in college. Same thing
Yeah.
with insurance. So that was the process. That's a process to
Mhm.
become an insurance agent. My
Mhm.
process was very, very different. So it was definitely not that way. I did it the hard way.
How is the hard way?
The hard way?
Yeah.
Well, I did the studying on myself, which meant I paid for everything myself. I sat in the classroom back then for a week to 2 weeks straight. I didn't have an instructor to tell me how to study. What I ended up doing was I found a person in Southern California to help me study. And
Mhm.
I sat there for 5 days. Literally, I wouldn't recommend this to anybody, but this is my story.
Yeah.
I memorized the entire exam, all the questions and answers. There was about 500.
Nice.
So I memorized all of it for 5 days. We haven't gone to all this other stuff, but
Mhm.
my GPA in high school was a 0.58 cumulative. I did not graduate high school nor junior high. So in order to ask me to pass the test,
Mhm.
kind of I don't do that good in studying. So that's why I memorized it. So I did everything the opposite, but nonetheless, it actually
Mhm.
I did it. Everybody passed the test differently. I did it the hard way, but I think
That
maybe
worked for
because
you.
it worked for me and maybe
Mhm.
because of that, echo más ganas. I mean, I worked that hard. So I'm like,
Mhm.
shoot, I'm not going to lose this license.
Yeah.
So knock on wood. Yeah, I definitely did it the hard way. It was the way that it was meant to be for me.
What does your day-to-day and work look like?
Before I get to work, I prepare my mind. I read, I meditate, I pray.
Mhm.
Sometimes I sing because I like singing music, but I really get my mind focused well, which, and also my heart, because I think they both work together. And then once I'm in work mode, it's like tunnel vision. I'm in business mode. I think I prepare myself personally to prepare myself professionally. And then once I'm there, I think it's checking in to see how staff is doing. How's your day? What's going on? I think that is very important because it's not all about me. How are
Mhm.
you doing? How are you feeling? What do you have on your plate? What's a priority? And then along the way, trying to encourage and build somebody else up that's in my office.
Mhm.
And then looking at what's going to be the priority of the day. What does emails look like? Possible text messages? Is there an escalated phone call, less an escalated claim, an important quote that has to be done right now? I think that's when my life usually looks professionally. And then once I leave, I try to basically recycle my mind
Mhm.
back out of work mode because I've learned not to take work home with me. So that way I have a balanced life personally, because if I don't, it actually
Mhm.
affects me professionally.
You mentioned right now that you prepare yourself in the morning before going to work. How does that look like?
It's a multiple things. Right now, I think I only have one thing written on my mirror. I like using a dry erase marker because I'll write sometimes phraseologies, maybe something, a quote off of a song, a poem, a book to really get my mind where it needs to be, whatever
Mhm.
that looks like for that moment. So, and it's looking at repeating it on my phone. Actually, I have like 5 alarms that go off that reminds me about loving myself, being myself. I have faith that everything's going to work out together for my good. I forgot what it says, something about mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. So I do several different things. It really depends where my life is at. I sometimes have like a
Mhm.
devotional that I'll read. It's probably like a 5-minute read.
Mhm.
So, and then while I'm either doing my makeup or getting my breakfast ready, whatever that looks like, I
Mhm.
usually have my earbuds and maybe listening to a book or a podcast. So
Oh.
I try not to have my phone on. It's usually on silent or do not disturb
Mhm.
for like honestly a good hour. I just want to feed myself because I notice when I don't, I feel frazzled. I'm constantly giving, it seems
Mhm.
like, whether that's giving to somebody else or maybe even giving to myself.
Mhm.
But when I feel like that's something I have to do. So it really depends what I have going on. Right now, I have only one affirmation written, and
Mhm.
I thought maybe I should have more, and I change it up as I go. Whenever I feel led, like, okay, I'm done with that section of my
Mhm.
life or for a season, then I usually move on to what I feel either my inner core or God is telling me to do next.
What have you learned about yourself in this journey of being an entrepreneur?
What have I learned about myself?
Yes.
Hmm, that's a lot. Gosh, so much. Not to doubt myself, my intuition, whenever you feel, and feelings are true, and sometimes they can mislead you because sometimes you can have a really bad day.
Mhm.
And I've learned not to make a decision during that point. But when you have something intuitively in you that you just have a knowing, run with it because that is meant for you in your life, which I'll speak for me. It's for me in my life. I've learned to take risk at all costs, whether that's at the risk of myself, the risk of finances, the risk of my business. It's almost like a little bit of a gamble, but not a crazy gamble. Basically, betting on myself, not to always bet on anybody else, because at the end of the day, all you have is you. Whatever that journey looks like for myself is
Mhm.
the best person to bet on is me, to not doubt myself
Mhm.
because, or not to fear. And it doesn't mean that I'm perfect, that I don't fear. The acronym for fear, and don't get me wrong, I do repeat this to myself, is false evidence appearing real. They're usually not even real, or maybe they are, but fear makes them huge. They went from this to like massive. So I think that's some of the things I've learned being an entrepreneur, believing in myself against all the odds. Even though I know people love me and they're like, no, you probably
Mhm.
should do this. I just have a knowing at times and I just run with it. I remember opening up my business. I actually never wanted to be a business owner. I remember during this particular year, I picked up a check from somebody for my boss. And I remember she looked at me, she's like, you're going to become a business owner. I'm like, no, no, I'm okay. I'm a
Mhm.
licensed agent working for somebody else. I don't want to be a business
Mhm.
owner. I think that same month, I was reading one night my Bible, and I literally heard an audible voice on my right hand side. Back then, I used to read on the floor with my stomach on the ground. Terrible for your neck. Don't do that anymore. But that's the position I was in reading,
Yeah.
and I heard a very stern, clear voice that said, open a business. And I said, no. I said, no, I don't want to open a business.
Mhm.
And it's like I wanted to turn around, but I knew not to. And that was February of that year. And by July, I had laid myself off and I was opening a business, I believe September of that year, if I'm not mistaken, August or September of that year. But it was going against all the odds. Back then, the state of California was filing bankruptcy. People were losing their homes, people were losing their jobs, businesses were closing. It was the wrong time to open up a business. All I knew is that I knew what I heard. That's all I knew. And I had to believe in me that I knew what I heard. And I heard this voice and it was very distinctive. And I ran with it. And I think it's not necessarily believing entirely in myself because I'm human and there's only so much I can do, but it's also there's hope being that you hope for the best.
Mhm.
And then there's faith. Faith makes that hope into reality. And for me, it was the faith that something is bigger than me that would make that into reality. And I think that has been my most pivotal thing in my business is the faith in something bigger than me and in the faith that that creator made me, which made me for a certain purpose. And I have to believe that against all the odds. And I think that has been probably my biggest takeaway as a business owner, amongst everything else I just told you about risk taking and all of
Mhm.
that. I mean, there's a lot that I've learned, but that's probably my foundation, or I should say that is my foundation for being an entrepreneur.
You've been in this industry for 20 years or
18
going, oh, 18 years. Okay,
close.
close. In my perspective of you seeing you like succeed and obviously not showing off, but like letting other people see, look, I won this or this is what I'm going through, etc. I feel like you succeeded. Everything that you accomplish is it looks like you're a successful woman. But what success mean to you? I want to know
Mm,
that.
good question, Miss Patty. Wow. I think professionally is learning to be humble and knowing your self worth, not to be arrogant about it, and learning to accept what I've accomplished and keeping well balanced and level headed. Successful also means is bringing other people along with me. It's not just me, whether that's a team or clientele, friends or family. I think success is also, I really believe the personal and business life do this. They really intertwine, even though I try to separate them in my life.
Mhm.
Who I am personally is who I am professionally, and vice versa. I think it's also being content of who I am in the inside, being able to have enough money to buy food, not having to count how much money it costs to buy some bananas. I know that might be like, oh, you have a lot of money. Well, I was at a point where I figure out how much food stamps I had to buy a pound of bananas, and I don't have to do that. So for me, that's success for me.
Mhm.
That I can open my pantry and I love it. I get so happy when my pantry's full.
Yeah.
So that is success for me. Eating some
Okay.
good sushi, being able
Oh.
to take people out to eat. But at the end of the day is
Mhm.
knowing who I am inside. I think
Okay.
that is success. That I have integrity personally and professionally.
Mhm.
And I think for me, that is success. Having a bank account that's at a certain amount, it does add to that. But for me, that's not everything,
Yeah.
but it does add. I mean, what good is it to have 50 or $85,000 when you're not truthful, or you see somebody who's homeless and you have an extra hot dog in your hand? What good is to have $50,000 or 85 when you didn't
Mhm.
give your extra hot dog to the person and not your leftovers,
Yeah.
your best? So I think that for me is success in both ways.
My mom always says when she makes food, she wants to give it to someone, she always says, give them the best thing that you would like for them to give you. Don't just because, oh, you're full, oh, just give the leftovers to them. No, the best thing. And that's true.
And it gives the other person a sense of that they're valued. I remember waiting in line at the park to get free clothes, or waiting in line to get food.
Mhm.
And when you get like the bottom barrel of like, this person did not want it, you know that you're lesser than. You're not being
Yeah.
told. But to be given like, I don't know, a simple box of Cheez-Its to a kid, it's like, wow, I got Cheez-Its.
And
That's
they're
a good.
new.
Yeah, like, I mean, so I think
Yeah.
that's huge. I think what your mom's concept is absolutely right. If
Mhm.
you made a caldo de pollo, like a chicken soup,
Yeah.
don't give the person the wing.
Yeah.
Freaking A, give them the chicken breast.
Yeah.
You know, if it's albondigas, don't be giving them 5 little meatballs. Give
Mhm.
them 10.
Yeah.
If you eat 10, you give them 10.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with your mama.
That's true.
I'm going to your house to eat then.
Yeah. Whenever you want, we're here.
Albondigas, just saying.
Right. Okay. I'll let her know and I'll message you.
Yes.
As you mentioned, you said that you've been in the farmers insurance industry for about 15-ish years. And from what you showed us, you've done really well. I want to know what's your daily habits that led you to what you have now?
Consistency. I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to be a successful entrepreneur. Is being consistent, doing the same thing over and over. No difference than Michael Jordan. He shoots hoops all the time. No different than Oprah Winfrey. Keeps doing interviews just like you. I think it's consistency, doing the same thing over and over and over. And I think for me in my business world, the best thing that I do is actually teach insurance. I don't even sell it. I teach it. I explain it. I literally do drawings. I make it. I'm not telling you this is this exclusion form. This is the premiums. This is a variable universal life policy. I will say those words, but then
Mhm.
I make it into everyday language, into everyday verbiage. Like nobody knows this insurance jargon. I think it's just simplifying it and being consistent and having the best interest of that person who's in front of you, making that plan, me making that plan for them, for their lifestyle. But I think even with all that being said, is consistently doing that day in and day out. Once my mind is somewhere else, I lose focus. And if I don't lose focus, it's kind of like somebody who's a boxer. You go into the boxing ring, you're not going in saying you're going to lose. You're going in saying you're going to win round 1, round 2, if it all goes all 12 rounds. But it's that consistency of the mindset. And as long as you're consistent in what you're doing, at least for me, I think that's what's gotten me the numbers of where I have, not even just the volume, but the quality. So therefore the quality eventually leads to the volume, and the volume leads to the money leads to the awards, and so forth. So I think
Yeah.
it's when it draws down to everything, I think it's the consistency.
And it does show that you really care about your clients because you explain it well. And even if we don't get it, you still go deeper and you're like, okay, well, this is the way. I feel like that's really helpful.
Thank
'Cause
you. Nobody knows insurance. I understand that clients don't know what to ask because you
Yeah.
don't. That's for me to ask you to pull that information out to figure out, okay, what is Patty thinking? What is her life like right now? What does she want to do in the future? What does she want to have in the future? And then really put something together and just really make it simplified. So thanks for the comment. We try.
You're welcome.
You know, our drawings.
Yes.
We literally do a drawing for you.
Yeah.
This is insurance, but this is not insurance. This part is not insurance. Don't believe this part. They're lies. This is the truth.
Easy. Yeah. More
Or
people should be like you guys.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Welcome. How do you stay motivated when things get hard?
So to answer your question, this is what has kept me motivated. It's my vision board.
Okay.
I have had it taped on my office for years. And the first thing it says is the promise.
Okay.
What does God promise me? What have I promised myself? And the butterfly represents a new life. I'm grateful for the life that I did have, but I definitely don't want to repeat my childhood.
Yeah.
This represents, I told you I like food, that I would have enough money for the good food. I don't want to eat green beans anymore. Let me get some shrimp. That I would have a house to provide. I like this because this represents that I would have people over to entertain, family, friends.
Okay.
And then this represents my fun side. I want 2 classic cars.
Ooh. Have you gone?
So
Do you have it?
I had one. I had a 1966 Ford Mustang for like 21 years.
Oh, wow.
And I eventually want like a 68, 69 Super Sport Chevy Camaro.
Okay. I need to look that up because I don't know what it looks like.
Fun, either black on black or maybe silver on black, not too sure, or gray on black. But
Nice.
anyways, this is what keeps me motivated. I've had it. I recently just removed it just last year because I redid a new one because this is pretty old. I had to laminate it, but that has what's kept me motivated because there's times that you think like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
You know, you have a bad day. My office just flooded.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, things happen either out of your control financially, personally, maybe your marriage, maybe your health, gosh, your family. I mean, things will discourage you. And I had that on my wall. So every time I would sit here, my clients were on the other side, there was a wall behind me and that would be behind them. And when they would leave, it's just a reminder. And right above that, I had a scripture. I have a scripture. I think it's Joshua 1:8, being strong and courageous, you know, don't turn to the left, don't turn to the right. You know, God will be with you wherever you go. So I've had that vision board and I still actually, I really truly do have a second vision board that I just did this past summer and I revamped it. And that's what keeps me motivated because what am I doing and why? What is your why? I mean, if it's for money, fine. But at the end of the day, what are you going to do with that money? What is the greater purpose of it all? Because we will all be knocked down, not once, not twice, many times in our life. And there's going to be times nobody's going to be there to lift you up. I know people are there to care, but there'll be times where there's nobody. And the only person who can lift you up is you. And there'll be times that people say, don't give up. I'll be honest with you, Patty. I gave up. I really have given up. I don't like to say that I'm a quitter, but I have. I have questioned, I have doubted, I have feared. And then I just think, okay, what is my greater goal? After I've cried and I look in the mirror, my mascara is down and I'm like, oh, I cried more because I look worse. You know, it's like, oh gosh, you know, but it's not knowing how you're going to pay your employees. It's not knowing this is true. I did not have money to get to work. I had a mortgage. I was supporting myself and somebody else. And I literally did not have gas money to go to work. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I had to go to work to make money. I'm self-employed. It's in those moments that out of desperation, you find yourself. You really do. And it's like, what is the bigger picture? It doesn't mean that you make all your decisions correctly and wisely at that time. But I think it's that motivation of something like that. Something as so simple as getting construction paper and like cutting out pictures and then just gluing them on. It's getting that construction paper and gluing, you know, cutting things out and gluing them on. It's not even from the mind that I made that. It's from my soul because mind can trick you on whatever you want to think. The mind wavers like this. It's good, it's bad, it's good, it's but what does the soul want? What does your heart want? What is that deepest desire that your soul desires? And putting that on paper for me still motivates me. I have actually a journal that I've written on, and even before this recording, I went for a walk. I went for like a 40, 30, 45-minute walk, and I was just thinking, okay, this is what I'm believing for, God. Why not? why can't I have this? Why can't I have the desires of my heart, whether that's manifesting them, in some kind of material form? But I think you have to manifest it inside of you, you believing it against all the odds. And there'll be days that you don't believe, and that's okay. There is a scripture that says, I believe God, but help me with my unbelief. Everybody doubts, but at least it keeps you going, that when you do look up one day, because one day you will look down, but when you raise your head back up, it's like, that is the reason why. It may be crazy, but dang, can I be crazy and dream about it instead of being crazy and like giving up?
Yeah.
So that has been my motivation. I know it's a long answer.
No, it's
but
okay.
That's my motivation.
What do you love about your job?
Teaching. I love teaching the clients.
Okay.
99.9% of the people don't know what insurance is. And if they do come in, it's really a bad misconception, whether that's commercials or hearsay. I love teaching and like making the drawing come to life. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. And I think, they get the concept, because really what I'm doing is selling a dream, a promise that if your house burns away, I'm going to do this. If you pass away, or when you pass away, I'm going to do this. So it's making their wishes come true, whether that's taking care of their home, their car, their family, their children, or their investment. It's really educating them, making them think. Most people don't have a plan, getting them to think, and they're like, okay, now I know what I have to do. I'm like, okay, so let's do it. So I love the education portion. And I think the other portion that I do like, oddly enough, it probably sounds bad, but when something tragic happens, whether that is simple as maybe you have your front windshield's cracked and it's broken, or a flat tire, or unfortunately your house, burnt, your home flooded, or somebody passed away. I enjoy the fact that when I see those numbers on the claim, that I just paid out $250,000. I just paid out $500,000, that I was able to keep that promise based off of a piece of paper that I wrote. And I'm going to get those people back where they belong. It's a tragic time in their life, and the last thing they need to worry about is money. If your house burned down, it is tragic. I've had a woman where her daughter lost her leg at 16 from a car accident. A head-on collision was not their fault. It was a tragic time. The policy that we agreed on and we wrote, that I wrote and that I suggested, was able to pay them out. Somebody who passes away, it is tragic. But the one thing I do want you to do is to grieve, but to grieve without having to worry how you're going to pay your electricity bill, to not have to worry about how you're going to pay for a therapist, because now you need therapy. I think that is probably the second gratification I do have from my job. And probably the third is building the people behind me, meaning, the first person I think about is my office manager, Zio, is seeing her grow and stretch, and sometimes I'm part of that stretching portion. And believe it or not, they stretch me. It's seeing employees have a goal and buy a car, didn't think they could afford, getting them to think outside the box, a different mindset, whether that is educational. I'm very big in books, self-taught, or that is either faith driven, whatever their faith is building them in that way as a person. And I think along that way also makes them an incredible, essential part of the agency, being a staff member.
Throughout your life, have you had mentors?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, you're one of my mentors now.
Let's throw that in this podcast.
Right.
I'm just kidding. No, yes, of course, Patty. I'm here for you.
Thank you. What role have mentors played in your life and career?
Oh, tremendously. I don't know if you're going to ask me this. I know I saw that one of the questions is, how did I get my first mentor? And I was at church and I would see this couple, Ben and Lourdes. I didn't know who they were, but I was like, I see them here all the time. And I see how they interact. And oddly enough, I saw her interact in the business world. So not only did I see her interact personally in church, but also professionally. And she didn't know who I was. I saw her one day at church, and I don't know where it came from, because before, what you see now, I was super shy. I was totally an introvert, girl. Totally an introvert. I do both now, but back then I was majorly an introvert. But I remember just going up to her and I just thought, she has something that I don't. And she's old enough to be my mother, but I just saw the way she carried herself. There was like this aura, this something about her. And I like, she has something that I don't have, but I want, and I don't know how to get there. So I just like, hi, my name is Natalie. I was wondering if maybe you can mentor me. And she's like, yes. She probably said something like that. And that was my first experience of having a mentor. I was in my younger 20s. And ever since then, I've just learned to have mentorship. She's still a part of my life. I think we've known each other now about 20 years or so, close to 20 years. I've just had different women that I'll either ask to be a mentor, or they just kind of just actually happens. And I think most women are eager to share what they've gone through. And not just any mentor, like somebody who's wise. I think once you start meeting somebody, for me, there's a big difference between gossip, chisme,
Mm-hmm.
novela, and wisdom. Somebody who's going to tell me the truth in love, but also be wise about it. And I've learned with having mentorship, either I take all of the information they gave me or I take pieces that really apply to me. So I think mentorship is essential. There's a few women that I've connected with probably just late last year and early this year that somewhat mentor me. I did a conversation with somebody earlier today. Most of the time, they're usually older than me, if not close around my age. And that doesn't really essentially matter. I think you can also learn from people younger than yourself. Maturity is not necessarily a number. You can be 28, but literally have the soul of a 45-year-old person. I love mentorship. And I think not only have they taught me personally, like, I mean, it's just as simple as wearing blush. I remember one person was like, Mija, maybe you should wear some blush. And I was like, yeah, you look a little washed out. And I was like, ooh. And they said it in love, but I was
Yeah.
just like, so now I'm like blushed. So I'm
Yeah.
not looking so blanca, you know?
Yeah.
Not like Snow White without Snow White even had blush. But but even just wearing a slip under certain garments, learning how to bend down. I didn't have that. I didn't even have somebody how to show me to wear a bra. I stole my first bra. So even like when I bend down, like I have you can't tell, but I have a dress on. So if I bend down too low, I do this, or I bend down a certain way from my knees down. And even just a handshake and looking at somebody in the eyes, or, you know what, I have an issue, Lourdes. How do I present this to this person? Like, what would you say? And she gives me an idea. And I'm like, okay, I really like how she phrased that. I will, but let me put a twist to it. I think mentorship is essential, whether you are personally, you're a stay-at-home mom, you're a student, you're single, or you're a professional, whatever that looks like, I think is essential.
What advice would you give to someone starting out?
Advice starting out: learn to make friends who have already been there and done that. Even if it means just walking into an office, a store, boutique, whatever, you're a hair salon stylist, walking in and introducing yourself and saying, hi, I'm so and so. I want to do what you're doing and I'm just starting. Do you have any advice? And can I talk to you? And if you're a hairstylist, meeting other hairstylists, but also meeting people who are not in your profession. You'd be surprised what you can learn from somebody who has an auto body shop. Honestly, you really, or a boutique. I think making friends, making connections, basically, you're going to need that help. When people tell me they want to be an entrepreneur, they want to open a business, I ask them why. And it's like, because I want to make money, or I know how to cook really well. I'm like, okay, that's good. You know how to cook really well. That's a restaurant or taqueria, whatever that may be. But do you know about workers' comp policies? Do you know that you have to have a policy packet for your employees? But what do supplies look like? How much do supplies do you need? Do you need styrofoam cups? All these other things that come into play. Do you know what kind of signage you're going to have? Did you know your signage can only be so big depending on the storefront of your office or your building? Things like that people don't know. Or, okay, you want to start selling clothing. Do you have a social media platform? And who runs that? And do you post consistently every day? I think that's why it's important, if you're going to do any entrepreneurship, is even if you don't know anybody, literally walking in. And I think most entrepreneurs we've been there, done that we're willing to say, okay, do this and don't do that. You might get some bad apples along the way, honestly, but they'll really make you appreciate the good ones. So maybe you needed to run into the bad ones. But most of the time, they're going to be helpful because, most entrepreneurs don't make it past a year or 3 years. It's after 5 years that you start really making some good revenue. You're not having to eat mac and cheese or fideo every night. You can eventually afford some beef. But most of them they do really want to help. But I think building that community of what that looks like for you in your scope of business.
What you said, that just asking and introducing yourself, some people don't want to be like vulnerable when asking, like, oh, hi, my name is Patty, can you help me? I feel like this time with social media and everything's so perfect that if you're being honest, a bad thing in a way. And I don't really like that, because at the end of the day, we're humans and we need connection. We need that imperfection. So just you saying that, it makes me happy.
We are all flawed. We have to be imperfect. Nobody's perfect but God. And social media makes it seem like you are God and goddess, that you can't be touched and everything is perfect. That's really just commercials. That's really like airbrushing your life. That's really not life. I think people appreciate when you're your true, authentic self. I really don't put a lot of my hardships or business stuff on my business page. I do certain things once in a while, but when my office flooded, I literally asked for help. Even though I'm an insurance agent, I insure my own office and I wrote my own policy. I was like, wow, I need help. And I realized during that time, even that video I posted got probably it got the most views. I can see what viewership looks like. And
Mm-hmm.
I think people appreciate when you're your true authentic self. I think everything is with balance. I mean, if you're always on social media, constantly throwing all this sorrowful things,
Mm-hmm.
right before I got on this call, I actually texted a group of friends of mine. They know what I'm going through with this flood incident, but I also specifically said, this is the good that's happening. This is where I'm supposed to be at this time. This is where God wants me to do, and I'm going to do it. So I think the vulnerability is essential if we were not flawed, because we don't like that, right? We want perfect makeup to look flawless.
Yeah.
By the way, somebody did my makeup today. This is not me.
Oh, really?
Yes, girl. Oh, I was like, I'm gonna be on the thing with Patty. Let me get my
Oh,
makeup done. Miss Tiffany did this.
nice. Well, you look beautiful.
Thank you. But I think the point
Yeah.
is, we are flawed, and those flaws actually amplify the good in us. It really truly does. If we did not have flaws, then we wouldn't appreciate the good. And I think people need to know that, because it is the truth. And I think as we stand in front of the lines at the check stands of the grocery store, we see all these magazines, and how do they look like? Wonderful. But somebody who looks like crap, they blast them.
Yeah.
They blast their face all over the place. And that is not humanity. We were never built to be perfect. We are meant to cry. We're meant to have hard times. We're meant to pray. We're meant to have hope, and we're meant to rejoice and be happy. But unless we can't show that, then we're not helping the next person next to us, because it looks like we have it all together. In reality, I don't have it together. I actually don't. Business owner or not, I still struggle. I still constantly learn. I fall on my butt, and I'm like discouraged, or I'm embarrassed. But, hearing other people who have been there or actually in that moment with me, it's quite helpful. There's times that when somebody is sorrowful, sometimes you don't even know what to say. You just sit with them. And that is their vulnerability. And I think that's what makes us our authentic self. Not having it all together, because we don't, but owning what we do have and working towards a greater good and accepting for who we are at that moment.
What do you know now that you wish you'd known when you were younger?
Faith in myself. It sounds very simple, but I doubted myself for a long time. I doubted my gifts. I think God gives everybody a gift. If not, God gives you multiple gifts. And I wish I would have known the faith I have in myself now. There will never be another me. I am unique, just like everybody's fingerprints, just like you, that you have a purpose, and so do I. And to not doubt what that is. And at some point in my life, I actually did not know completely what my purpose was, but all I knew was to go to the next step. And I think even until now, I'm 42, and I still think, with all the noise and distractions in life, what is my purpose, and what do I believe in myself? And if this is the life that I have, and this is the life God has called me to do, and out of my free will I choose it, then let me do it well. But what is the faith I have in me, and what am I going to do about it? Against all the odds, what do I believe in my soul? Not even in my mind, but in my soul, because I think whatever is in your heart, whatever is in your soul, actually controls the mind. The mind sometimes will give you some noise, but really, what is it deep down inside? What do I believe in myself? And I wish I would have known that earlier. And I try not to really focus that on a whole lot. Like, why didn't I know this earlier? But I know it now. And maybe because I know it now, I accepted this invitation. Maybe because I know it now, that I'm willing to go full force ahead, that this is my purpose, this is my calling, and nothing's going to stop me.
I agree with you. And recently, I was watching Angela Bassett. She was giving an inspirational speech while accepting her award. And she said, if you're with God, who could go against you, or something like that. And that was really inspirational. Like, I really liked it. And what you said, that thought just came back, and I was like, that's very true. I feel like any job, there's always going to be doubt. So having faith, it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Faith in something and the ability that you are given. She's like, who can be against you? And it's true. It's you. It's you against the world. It's you and God. Like, God created whatever you believe, whatever that is, and that's fine. But you're also a creation, but you create too. You really do create. And what is it in you? I wish I would have known that earlier. And I wish I would have ran with that earlier. But for those of you who are listening and you're like, I'm barely there and I'm 60, or I'm barely there and I'm 25 or 18 or 15 and I don't even know yet. You'll get there. Don't beat yourself up, because that life path was there for a reason. And that was for specifically you, not for your neighbor, not for Patty, not for me, but specifically for who you are meant to be. And at the end of the day, you have free will, what you decide what you're going to do with that. So faith in yourself without all the noise. And even with the noise, what are you going to believe? Are you going to believe in you? Because at the end of the day, all you have is you. When nobody is around and you're all alone at night in your bed and it's dark, all you really truly have is you, whether you're married or with children or single. That is who you go to bed with, is you. And do you believe in you? And even with the doubts, still keep going.
Do you have a philosophy of life?
Phraseology that comes to my mind is treat others as you want to be treated.
Yeah.
And I think that covers whether personally, relationship wise, love, finances, treat other people as you want to be treated. I think that's so important. I think that would end wars. That would end divorces. That would end people being fired from a job. That would end a lot. It really would. And love yourself as you love your neighbor. Well, treat them as you want to be treated. So I think that's probably in the forefront of my mind. Doesn't mean I'm perfect. I do some really dumb stuff sometimes. And I'm like, I do try to own it. I do try to talk about it.
What would be the best piece of advice for living? So if like a young person would come and ask you, what's the most important thing for living a good life? What would you say?
I think it goes back to treating people the way you want to be treated. I can't think of anything else. It really does apply professionally, the way you're going to treat your colleagues, your clients, your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, your family. I just think that is such a simple golden rule, but yet so hard because we want to go with our ego. We want to get justice. We want an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. We want vengeance is really what we want because we want to justify what we felt. And it doesn't mean that your feelings are not real, but it's going back to treating people how you want to be treated. And there's also a healthy balance with that. There's times you have to put healthy boundaries too. You know, I've learned that. So I think that is essential for the remaining part of your life. It makes you a good person. It's like having a peach. You can have a really pretty peach on the outside, but if the inside of the pit is rotten, peach is worthless. You and I know both. But be that gold rule, you would be good in the inside. You would be beautiful, and that beauty would eventually radiate on the outside.
Whose career inspires you and why?
Ooh, whose career inspires me? Oh gosh. You might laugh at this one. Has nothing to do with my profession. A character made up for a movie, but Rocky. He was a boxer.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like Rocky.
He fought against all the odds. He was handsome too in the movie. But no, the motivational things, he keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. He keeps doing what's right. He builds himself up. And even till this day, honestly, on one of my motivational playlists, his voice is on there and I hear it. It's the world is not made of butterflies, rainbows and butterflies. It's a mean and nasty world and it's going to knock you down to your feet. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do in that part? And this is, I think, I don't know, maybe part 3 or part 4, but it's the son's like blaming it all on him, like passing the buck. And he's like, dude, that's you. That's your life. But in the very beginning, he goes against all the odds. Bachelor pad apartment looks terrible. It's like, wow, you live like that, Rocky, you know? I think even though it's not necessarily it's a career, it's the principles that I applied to a career. I can't say there's nobody really in my profession that I look up to. I think there's people that I have kind of admired here and there. Like, okay, that's where they live. That's how they act. That's how they present themselves. I've gleaned and I've taken bits and pieces away from that. But I can't say there's that specific person, but I really do like Rocky.
If you weren't in the insurance industry, what career would you like to be in?
Oh gosh, girl. I love music, dancing, theater. I would totally go into that. And I also like archaeology. I like just having some shorts and a t-shirt, like digging in the dirt, looking for artifacts. I love history. I think history is his story. It repeats itself and you learning from the past. So I think I'm a little bit split between archaeologists. Maybe I can be a famous singer, dancer, actress, you know?
Okay.
But then on the side, when I'm not filming a movie, I can like go into the archaeology world and like be in Egypt somewhere, Greece, you know, going through Plato, you know, wherever he was at. I would do that.
That's cool. That's interesting.
That's just my fun. That's just the fun side. But I really do like speaking. I like teaching. I guess maybe it's 3 things. I like teaching. I like speaking. I like motivating. I like basically doing this, what we're doing right now.
Okay.
If I can do that as a full-time gig, but if just my dream, yeah, actress, singing, dancing, archaeology, a little bit of combination of those 3.
To end the interview, I'm going to ask you some bonus questions. What advice advice would you give your younger self on achieving your dreams?
Believe in yourself. Don't believe the lies. The world will tell you lies. The world told me lies, that I was ugly, I was never going to amount to somebody, that I hope that you get a spouse that beats you. Those were the lies. But to believe in the truth and what I wanted that truth to look like, to believe in me, to believe in good, even though maybe I saw 1% of good, and to run with that.
What advice would you give to the girls and boys watching this?
I know a lot of people say don't give up. I'm not going to say that. You will give up. That is the honest truth. You will give up. You will feel defeated. You'll probably tear up your dream if it's on paper or in your mind, but it's so much glorious when you rebuild again. Dream and dream big and do well, do good, be a good person and help the next person after you. And I think you will have a good life. It will be hard. It will not be easy. But I think even being an Olympian, you have Olympians go through hard times. And I think that is the triumph of the success. So when you do give up, get back up. You might not get back up right away, but you will eventually get back up and keep going against all the odds. Just keep going. Don't go right. Don't go left. Go straight. And if you happen to go right and you go left and you go the wrong way, that's okay too. Learn from that. There's three people in life. There's people who learn off the lessons of others. There's people who learn off of their own lessons and their own mistakes. And there's a third person who they never learn. Be the first two. That would be my advice.
What you just said, be the person who learns about others and then the person who learns about their own mistakes. Is there a combination of those two?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can do both. If you're asking that for yourself or for your for viewers, absolutely. There's times I've learned off of other people, and there's other times that even I learn off those people, I twist it, make it my own way. Sometimes I really do believe that you just have to take the recipe of life. Like, let's say life is spaghetti. You need pasta, tomato sauce, and beef. But what if you don't like beef and you put pork sausage? But for you to learn how to make spaghetti, that's what you first did. But if you put the pork sausage, is it still spaghetti? Yeah, you just made it your own now. So you can learn from others. And then sometimes I believe it's just basically copying that. If you don't know what else to do, that's what I did. And then maybe learning from others and making a twist to it, just like that spaghetti recipe. And there's also times I feel like I have learned the most. Man, it's learning from those mistakes. But those mistakes, you either become bitter or you become better. You either go through it or you grow through it. You'll have a test or a testimony. You have a mess or you have a message. Which one do you want? And I think life is a little bit more sweeter when you learn on your own. Well, not on your own, when you learn from your mistakes, because it sucks and it hurts. And sometimes you hurt yourself and sometimes you hurt people along the way. But when you make those mistakes, own them 1000%. Do not justify it. Own them. And I think having a combination of the both is great. Being the last person that you don't learn from your mistakes at all, that's detrimental, not only to others, especially for yourself. So definitely the first two, you can be a combination. I'm a combination of the both. Okay. I've definitely done both. Oh, Jesus, help me.
Last question. What would you want people to take with them in this conversation?
Hope. And out of hope is wishful thinking, hope that something can become better. And out of hope, turning that into faith. And faith is turning that into reality. Hope. People can go through a lot of crap. People can lose their home. People can die. People can go through chemotherapy. People can go through a divorce. People have gone through seeing loved ones go through suicide. But when you have no hope, that's when you die in the inside. You may be alive on the outside, but in the inside you die. But to have hope in whatever that is, I don't care how ridiculous it looks like, have hope. Steve Jobs had hope in something. Michael Jordan did, Oprah did, Disney did. Against all the odds they did. You can do that too, whatever that hope is, and turn that hope into faith. Faith is something tangible. Faith is the evidence hoped for, things yet not seen, and turning that into something tangible, faith.
That concludes the interview. Thank you, Natalie, for taking your time and being here with me. It really means a lot. And I know this conversation will help others continue fighting on and making their dreams come true. Porque si se puede. Thank you for watching and listening to this podcast, and I'll see you guys on the next one.